Hi there, and welcome to Valley to Vietnam. My name is James Scott. I'm going to be your host. Valley to Vietnam is a joint venture between the Sacramento Public Library and the Vietnam Veterans of America, Sacramento Valley's Chapter 500. It's our intent to trace the arc of experience experienced by our local Vietnam-era veterans as they went from Sacramento to Vietnam and then back again. Today's guest, Ted Adams, served 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. The first with the 9th Infantry Division, and the other 2 with the legendary Green Berets. Ted, thanks a lot for being on Valley to Vietnam, and of course, welcome home. All right,
Thank you.
So, you are well-rooted in the Sacramento area. If you could, tell us a bit about growing up in Sacramento, memories of Southside Park, and then also Broderick.
My parents, well, they moved here during, Mom did anyway, during I guess the Dust Bowl time, from Oklahoma. And they both went to Sacramento High, and that's where they met. And World War II came, Dad went to the war, came home, and I came along. And I grew up in Sacramento. I went to William Land Elementary over by Southside Park, a few streets away from Southside Park. We used to go for the 4th of July across the street to Southside Park, watch the fireworks. Then we moved down to 16th and X. Mom and Dad had bought a house over in Broderick, which is now West Sacramento. I guess some people still call it Broderick. I went to Elkhorn Village Elementary there up until the 6th grade. Then the 7th grade I went over to Washington Elementary and graduated from there, and then went to high school in James Marshall High School in West Sacramento.
A couple of the things that you'd mentioned as you were growing up in the Sacramento area, you'd kind of made it into high school and you're moving along, but you've always had a love for cooking.
Oh, yes.
And could you tell us a little bit about some of the places where you kind of learned your trade over here in Sacramento on this side of the river?
Certainly. Back in high school, one of the courses they offered was Boys Foods and Fabrics, where you learned how to, you made a shirt, which mine was pretty butt ugly, but my favorite color was red, so I made a red shirt. And once we made it, we had to wear it to school, and a lot of laughs on me on that. And also the cooking part. And I got interested in cooking, so I thought, well, geez, maybe I'll be a cook or a chef. Well, my mom's hairdresser was real good friends with Chet and Audrey Holt, who owned the Dollhouse. And I started there as what they call a pantry boy, making salad dressings and things like that. And I worked there for, I think, probably a year. And then I got offered a job at Christie's Elbow Room, it's on K Street, 20th and K. Well, at that time it was at 20th and K. And the Dollhouse was on 20th and L Street. So right across the street from the Cal Western Life Insurance Building, which that's mainly where we got a lot of our business from.
Got it. Okay.
And I worked there at Christie's probably, I would say about 8 months, and then I got drafted. I didn't want to go to Vietnam, so I volunteered for any kind of schooling I could get to keep from going to Vietnam. I figured a draftee, we only have 2 years to do in the Army.
Okay.
I went through basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, B45 training brigade, I guess you'd call it, in Tigerland in Fort Polk, Louisiana.
So you were at Tigerland, that's about a week and a half, and then you're off to Vietnam. You're off to...
Well, actually, it's longer than a week and a half at Bearcat.
Okay.
I mean, at Tigerland, because you have to do your basic training.
Okay.
And then from basic training, then they send you to a place to learn your trade, which is AIT, Advanced Individual Training. Well, I went to Fort Benning to jump school, and then they sent me to Vietnam with the 9th Infantry Division.
And then that was at Bearcat, essentially?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Bearcat was the home of the 9th Infantry Division at that time, which was near Long Binh, South Vietnam.
Okay, a little area just north of Saigon. Paint a picture for us of you actually going to Vietnam. Now you're with the 9th Infantry Division at Base Camp Bearcat, just north of Saigon near Long Binh, and you take on the position of an RTO, or radio telephone operator, for your platoon. It's tough work, but you've got a really good leader. If you could tell us a bit about Ocelot Man and the importance of having a good leader, a good lieutenant.
Yeah, well, my AIT consisted of, as artillery, I had a 13 Bravo MOS, primary MOS, which is an artilleryman. And so when they sent me to Vietnam, they didn't have any openings in any of the gun sections, nor the ammunition section. So they told me, okay, you're going to be Lieutenant Sabin's RTO. And at the time, being a young buck private, not knowing anything, I thought, wow, with a lieutenant, that's probably like a Jeep driver or something. Well, I was probably at the base camp maybe half hour. They told me to stow my duffel bag, gave me a bunch of ammunition and some grenades, and a PRC 77 radio, and put me on a helicopter. And I went out with an infantry unit as an FO, forward observer team, with Lieutenant Chris Sabins. Really a nice guy. We were there in the jungle as an RTO until I got wounded, and then they, not badly wounded, but just a few scratches. Well, they replaced me. I went back to the artillery unit. And then I went back out later on after my wounds healed. And we were in the middle of a fire mission. We had walked into a base camp, occupied base camp. And the lieutenant told me to call in our position and have artillery fire on this base camp. Well, every time I'd try to call 6-9er, Caisson 6-9er was Charlie Battery 1st 11th Field Artillery, which was I was assigned to. Lieutenant Sabin's call sign was 6-2. I was 6-2 Oscar. So when I'm on the radio trying to call in a fire mission, well, somebody came on my fire net calling Caisson 6-9er, this is World 6, over. And I couldn't get my fire mission going, so finally I told this World 6 to stay the blank off of my fire net, out. Well, I never heard any more from World 6. We got our fire mission, got our wounded evacuated, and went on back for a stand down in the rear, back to the fire base. And we were there probably a couple of days, and then all of a sudden the battery commander comes around and tells us, everybody get your shirts on, clean up your parapets, and stand by. We got VIPs coming in. Well, we looked up in the air, and here's all these helicopters and gunships coming in and landed, and I noticed all these red plaques on the side of the helicopters with white stars, which I knew they were generals. Well, General Westmoreland and a bunch of South Vietnamese generals and one Navy admiral was there. And they went into the CP and talked for a few minutes, and then they came down and talked to the troops. And when it came down to the parapet that I was at, a parapet is where it's a sandbag position where your howitzer sits.
Okay.
With the ammunition bunker on one side and personnel on the other, or powder on the other side. So we all come to attention, and we had this little red dog named Rusty that kept barking, and the generals came down asked us where we were from and what our names was. And Lieutenant Sabin just happened to tell General Westmoreland that Private Adams here is my 6'2" Oscar. And he turned to me and he looked at me and says, "You're 6'2" Oscar?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, stuck his hand out and he says, "I'm World 6." I thought I was going to go to jail. And then Rusty kept barking at him. And General Westmoreland went down to the next individual in the line. And this lieutenant general, a 3-star general, standing in front of me, goes, "Private, is that your dog?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're going to have to teach it to like generals."
So you're in a position as an RTO. Eventually, you move back into field artillery.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I found really interesting during our pre-production talks, I came out to the Chapter 500 hall, and prominently displayed in the hall is a North Vietnamese flag. You captured that flag.
Yeah, that was on my second trip to Vietnam. Yeah, we were in what they called the Iron Triangle in the Saigon area, in the Mekong Delta, and we were getting sniper rounds from a village. So we went in, eliminated the snipers, the ones that we could find. A few of them got away, and there was a backpack on this one Viet Cong, and so we searched the casualties for any documents pertaining to what units were there, or how many personnel were in the unit, anything classified that our intelligence people could use.
Right.
And in the backpack was a North Vietnam flag, brand new. They were going to put it up somewhere. It hadn't been put up yet. It was nice, folded up. Well, I latched onto it and brought it back with me as a war souvenir.
Another thing we had talked about was the almost fabled food in the military is the C ration. So we've got these C ration cans that most in the field troops are consuming. Now, you talked about how important it was to pick up or police your C rations.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? And also, the fact is you'd eventually become a demolitions expert in the Green Berets. Tell us about it, and then also, did any knowledge of those C rations kind of help you as a demolitions expert?
It was real critical that you didn't leave anything around for the enemy to find, simply because this guy could kill you with anything that he could find in the jungle, be it punji steaks, C ration cans that have not had both ends cut out of it and smashed. If you found one with say one lid cut off, he would pack it with explosives and make a booby trap out of it. So it was really important that you eliminated that problem for yourself or any other troops that might come through there,
Right.
along with civilians, non-combatants. There was a lot of casualties from non-combatants too because of booby traps. Yeah, it was very important.
You eventually cycled back into, and this is during your first tour, the 11th Field Artillery Regiment. If you could, tell us the routine of an artilleryman and setting up a secure perimeter, and you'd mentioned the whole concept of a hip shoot.
Yeah, a hip shoot is when you're moving from position to position, and there's a unit in trouble, and they'll call for a fire mission. Well, you pull off anywhere that you can pull off to. Rice paddies that's not flooded. You don't want to drive your howitzer or your vehicle with your howitzer. We were a towed unit, 105s. So you had to find a big enough clearing where you could set up your guns to fire that fire mission for the infantry or whoever was calling for the fire mission. You had to put out your perimeter. The gunnery sergeant was the next in command with as far as NCO wise. You had your first sergeant, who was your chief firing battery, who was your field first.
Okay.
In peacetime, the first sergeant always stayed back in the rear with the rear detachment, and the chief firing battery would be your field first.
Okay.
Then your gunnery sergeant, he would go out with the advance party to lay your base piece howitzer. So when the rest of the battery pulled in, you had one gun ready to fire.
So you've basically completed your tour with the 9th, couple of tours coming up with the Green Berets. You cycle back home to Sacramento, and we're going to make that big jump. Now, as you come back to Sacramento, you're going to spend time at the Sacramento Army Depot as a driver for General Harry Porter, who a really good guy and someone that you had some adventures with. I was wondering if you could go ahead and tell us about a country.
Yeah. When I came back from overseas, I came back on a compassionate reassignment because my dad got sick with cancer. And they assigned me to the Sacramento Army Depot as a compassionate reassignee, NCOIC, for anybody that came back on a compassionate reassignment. They would come and either call in or report to me saying, hey, I'm going to be here in case we needed to get a hold of them. And I did that for probably 5 months, I guess. And then the general's driver was leaving, and they moved me up to be the general's driver and to be an assistant to the depot sergeant major. And General Dukes invited to be going to luncheons and dinners and all. And this one day he had a luncheon engagement at the Lions Club, or what, it was either the Lions Club or the Rotary Club. I can't remember which one it was. Out on Howe Avenue. So I drove him out there, and we're going down Howe Avenue, and we passed this Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor. And he asked me what, he says, he never called me Sergeant. He always called me T or Ted. We were going down, and he says, Ted, what's Farrell's? And I said, well, sir, it's a old-time ice cream parlor. Well, lo and behold, the general loved ice cream. He was from the East Coast, I guess, back there. So he said, well, after this luncheon, we'll have to stop and have some ice cream. I said, yes, sir. So we went to the luncheon, and afterwards we came back. Mind you, we're in Class A uniforms. He's got 2 shiny stars up on his collar, awards that went up one side and down the other. And we go in, and he's looking at the menu, and he loved banana splits. And he had this thing on the menu. It's called the pig trough, banana split and a half. So he ordered it, and I ate some. I forget what kind of ice cream I ate. My favorite ice cream was strawberry. And he ate the whole thing. Well, here come the waiters and the waitresses, and they're beating this big drum, and they made the general stand up. And they announced, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman just finished the pig trough. And everybody clapped and cheered and everything. And they gave him this ribbon, a white silk ribbon, gold writing. I could see it as if it was just today. It said, I made a pig of myself at Farrell's. So we get ready to leave.
Right.
We get out to the staff car, and I open up the door for him, and he turns to me and he says, Sergeant, this never happened. And I wanted to get back to the depot and tell everybody what happened, but
of course
I couldn't do that because he told me it never happened.
Of course.
He was really a good officer. It's one of the best officers I ever served with. The Sacramento Army Depot had an abandoned radar station up on the mountain, and all that was up there was a caretaker and his wife. So once a month he would fly up there and inspect the grounds. Right. And he loved to fish. And there was I guess you want to call it a stream or a small river running through it that was just loaded with smallmouth bass. The first time we went up there, we didn't know it, but then the second time we went up, we threw Melmac, coveralls in the helicopter. Mm-hmm. The Army depot had a Huey there for his disposal, and we threw our rods and reels in there. So we land up there at the radar site, and he walks in one door, shakes the hand of the caretaker, and says hi to his wife, and walked out the other door, put on our coveralls, and we went fishing. And we caught a mess of bass, flew back to the Army depot. I called my wife. My wife came over, and we went to the general's quarters. He lived on the back side of the Army depot.
Okay.
Back where they had a 605th Limp Company, which is light equipment maintenance company. He had a house back there for the general, which had a small golf course there for him, 9 up, 9 back. And we played golf a while. Well, he played golf, I tore up the grass.
Yeah, I know that feeling,
I was
believe me.
Never a golfer, still is. But his wife and daughters would clean the fish, and we had a big fish fry.
Sounds great. After all these years, one of your driving passions in life is veteran advocacy. You are the president of the Vietnam Veterans of America, Sacramento Valley's Chapter 500.
Yes, I am.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the chapter, the mission, and what you guys do.
I am the current president of Sacramento Valley Chapter 500, Vietnam Vets of America. We have members all over the world, basically, people who joined while they were still in the service. We got people in the Virgin Islands. We have them in Europe, the Philippines, Japan, Thailand, but mostly here in the United States. And what we are a nonprofit organization, which is an outreach program. What we do is if one of our veterans, be him a Vietnam vet, World War II, Korean War, Afghan, Iraqi veteran, if you have a problem not getting your benefits or whatever pertaining to your service, we're there to help. Vietnam Vets of America is a national organization. We are chartered by the Congress of the United States. Our motto is, never again will one generation of veterans be abandoned.
And I've had the honor and pleasure of spending time at the hall. It's a fantastic environment, great atmosphere, and a place that I think a lot of guys can find, and women, of course, can find a good home. So with that, Ted, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Valley of Vietnam.
It was my pleasure.
And of course, welcome home.
Thank you again.
So that does it for this episode of Valley of Vietnam. For our producer, Jerry Ward, for our researcher, Christy Dentry, and of course our friends at Vietnam Veterans of America, Sacramento Valley's Chapter 500, I'm James Scott saying thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Valley of Vietnam.